Horns up and welcome to episode 3 of Ramen Wars. The top 8 ramen bowls in the city battle out against each other for the title of best ramen. The top 8 competing bowls are Izumi, Mizu, Kuuraku, Sifa, Miliwe, Chef James, Origami and Kofuku. Let's find out who's battling it out today. Contender 1. The Tonkotsu ramen from Sifa for 900 but I paid 970 on Swiggy with taxes and tip. Contender 2. Kuuraku special ramen from Kuuraku for 880 on the menu but 924 with GST. And we had to go pick it up because there's no delivery available. It's Sifa versus Kuuraku. Let the battle begin. Round 1. Fight! Alright, just on first look we can see that the Sifa ramen has the whole egg. Though the eggs look like they have been in some major battle. Just look at that, it's like there's like completely missing some stuff here, kind of cracked around, but you know, if it tastes good, that's all that matters. The Kuuraku ramen looks a little less generous. The Sifa ramen has a few more items, the woody mushroom, some bean sprout. These guys have given a lot of spring onions, the chashu pork, which is very very thinly sliced, almost like a wafer thin piece. The Sifa pork is a little thicker and it's also been torched, you can tell from the texture. But you know what, let the battle begin. Let's start with the broth. So right off the bat, the Kuuraku broth has a little bit of chili in it. There's like a little chili oil floating on top. It's not spicy, but it gives you that slight bit of flavor in the broth. The broth itself has a nice flavor as well. It's got a couple of different flavor notes, some good amount of depth in the broth. Let's try Sifa's broth now. The broth is a little more plain. I would say it's lacking some layers of flavor for sure. Let's get on with the rest of it. Let's get some of the pork and some of the noodles. Pork is nice and tender, no complaints there. Let's get some of the spring onion in as well. And let's try the egg now. Good flavor, the egg is perfect, the noodles are nice and soft as well, quite solid. Overall, the Kuuraku bowl eats quite well. Let's dig into this one now. Let's try the egg. The egg is cooked really well. It's really got a lot of flavor in it. I'm not really a fan of the sort of raw bean sprouts so much. Let's try some of the pork. So the noodles here are cooked well, but they're the slightly thicker kind, and the pork as well, I think the torching hasn't really helped the texture of the pork much, so it's not as succulent as it could be. Alright folks, it's time to score the ramen, and the bowl from Sifa gets a solid 7 from me. Unfortunately for me, the broth is really lacking depth of flavor or saltiness, and that kind of doesn't take the whole bowl up to the level where it should be. The egg was the best part of the ramen. The pork, like I said, is not as succulent as it could have been. The noodles well cooked, but again without that savory flavorful broth, they don't just really work to sort of give you like a great ramen experience. Even the mushrooms and the bean sprouts, unfortunately, without that broth tying it together, it just doesn't cut it. The Kuuraku bowl was also pretty good. The pork cooking was much better. The egg was delicious and the broth had a little more flavor. Even though it's not a pork broth, they actually don't do a pork broth. This is a chicken broth. I think this tells you how important the ramen broth is. It can make or break the ramen. So for me, the Kuuraku bowl is a solid 8, and that's why Kuuraku wins this round. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I will see you on the next episode of Ramen Wars. Until then, cheers and keep eating.